So, some pretty interesting revisions and ruling changes for the OCG, alright? So, these, once again, we knew that there was going to be more coming, and this is what we have here. So, bear in mind that these are for the OCG, not for the TCG, but we will probably be seeing some things follow suit here. Okay. Regarding the activation of monster effects for monsters returned to the extra deck, or the extra deck face down. Unless it's specifically referenced in the text, monsters that are returned to the deck in the extra deck face down cannot activate their effects. This includes mandatory effects. So, for example, the old way of resolving, if Elemental Hero Absolute Zero is returned to the extra deck by compulsory evacuation device, its effect to destroy all monsters your opponent controls would activate. Okay? Now, under the new way, Elemental Absolute Zero is returned to the extra deck by compulsory evacuation device. Its effect to destroy all monsters your opponent controls will not activate because the monster is going back to an unforeseen zone and it's basically hiding its effect from the world. So this is not really that big of a change in the grand scheme of things. I do like that they've basically adapted this change though, but we will see here how this actually plays out. Because I get it, like, Absolute Zero is not really a big game changer for the way it doesn't even see a lot of play. And I can't even think of a lot of other influential things that would do with this. I mean, the big thing was, like, Reborn Tengu, if it returned to the deck, it wouldn't trigger. And now that we're blanketing the extra deck in conclusion, or as well, in conclusion, as... I don't know. It is what it is. So, yeah, it's very nice that Absolute Zero will no longer trigger the minor things in life, I guess. So, regarding the activation of card effects that move away from their activation location before their effects activate. So, in card text, cards refer to their effect activation requirement as well as their activation location. For example, if it is an effect that activates a monster with itself is normal summon, it activates on the field. If it is a trap card whose effect is activated, if it is then sent to the graveyard, it activates in the graveyard. If a card moves location from its activation location to a different location before its effect is activated, its effects cannot be activated, including mandatory effects. Okay, so for example here, Old Way. Sangan is tributed to activate Crush Card Virus. And DD Crow is activated in the chain to banish the Sangan from the graveyard. The Sangan activates its effect after its chain is resolved. In this case, Sangan is treated as activating its effect in the graveyard. So, under the new text, the new way of resolving Sangan. So Sangan is tributed for Crush Card Virus, and DD Crow is activated in chain to banish the Sangan from the graveyard. Sangan does not activate its effect after the chain is done resolving. Effectively, we have somehow managed to make DD Crow a powerhouse in the grand scheme of things. Now, the big thing here is, does MST negate? What happens if my opponent activates said card? And no, stop. Alright. This is basically just in clarification to the whole Deneb Call the Haunted ruling that we've seen going around, the whole big ruling dispute between NA and EU. Alright, this basically is just catching the OCG up to speed. I like this. This is interesting. The whole DD Crow thing, very good example for what to expect. I don't know how often it's going to actually come up, but we got it now. Regarding a normal or special summon of a monster in relations to card effects that mention during the turn you activate this card or effect. Okay. So, some cards will have the text, during the turn you activate this effect. You cannot special summon monsters except blank type monsters. You guys are all familiar with these. Or during the turn that you activate this card, you cannot special summon monsters except with this card effect, which have activation requirements for whether or not the summon of certain monsters during this turn. So cards with this text will now check whether or not the summoning of the monster described in the text was successful for their activation. This one is, I like this one a lot. So example, Old Way of Resolving. You cannot activate Rage with Eyes of Blue during the turn that you normal summon. Your Maiden with Eyes of Blue was negated with Solemn Judgment. Alright, new way. So you can now activate Rage with Eyes of Blue during the turn that your normal summon of Maiden with Eyes of Blue was negated with Solemn Judgment. Basically, they are actually going full out here. If your opponent is actually negating the resolution of your summon, then congratulations, you're allowed to roll out another summon. Or, fulfill another requirement. This, I always feel it should have been this way, because why am I getting punished for requirements for something that didn't even fully resolve on the chain? All right, good example here. Like, now you can actually punish your opponent for negating something. It actually allows you to basically drop a larger board on the field and use more of these restrictive effects as long as your opponent had the punishment for you. This is very good. Now, these next two are kind of interesting. So, regarding the special summoning of monsters that mentioned they can only be special summoned once per turn. Alright. Certain cards have the text, you can only special summon blank once per turn, which means that you can only special summon a card or cards with that name one time during each turn. Cards with this text will now only count the summoning if the summoning of a monster with that name was successful. We're going to once again backtrack back up to the previous example here. Our opponent has summoned our card. Well, if they've negated the effect, and you know that like negation and actually touching down on the field are very different things in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! We're now having a much more literal definition of negate. So, old way of text. If your Hide Speed Roy Chambara Synchro Summon is negated by Solemn Judgment, during your turn, you cannot try to Synchro Summon High Speed Chambara or try to use any other types of cards to special summon it for the rest of the turn. Because, alright, it's got a restriction. But, new way of example, if your first Chambara is negated by a Solemn Judgment during your turn, you can literally attempt to summon another one. Alright, I like this. I definitely hope that NA will actually follow up with this ruling. Only because I finally want to see the look on my opponent's face when they, stop your first one of. And then you're like, ha, I have two of these things now. So, I can't think of any major examples right now that this actually, I guess, affects. Double Evolution Pill was a hard once per turn, right? Like, I guess that's relevant. And then I guess, what are some other boss monsters you can only summon one, whatever. But yeah, we're now saying that, we've literally turned up the definition of the word negate. We've actually given it a literal sense that we are literally stopping everything that our opponent is doing. Interesting. Alright, regarding continuous trap cards that special summon themselves to a monster zone by their own effects. Continuous trap cards, such as the Embodiment of Apophis, which have the effect special summon this card as a normal reptile Earth level 4 16/18. This card is also still treated as a trap card. Alright, that can special summon themselves to a monster zone will now free up the spell and trap card zone that they were placed in. This is huge. So for example, old way of resolving, if you have 5 cards set in your spell and trap card zone, you activate one of them, which is Embodiment of the Apophis, special summon it to the monster zone. That spell and trap card zone that Embodiment of the Apophis was in before could not be used, and you could not set in there now. Now, new ruling. You have 5 set spell and trap cards. You activate one of them, which is Embodiment of the Apophis. Special summons to a monster zone. Because the Embodiment of Apophis is now in the monster zone, the spell and trap card zone it was in is now empty, and now is available for use. Therefore, you can set a new spell and trap card into that zone. Once again, we've given new life to the actual trap monster archetype. Once again, trap monsters are still very slow. I think that this is not even a big boost for Eldritch. Metal Reflect Slime gets a pretty big boost out of this as well. But, alright, overall, big impactful things on the rulings. The counter trap, or the monster trap thing, pretty insightful. The whole negation thing, thank you. This is needed to happen for so long. About time. The whole ruling debate up here is fine. And then the activation window for things being returned back to the extra and things like that. interesting, but just bringing things up to speed. So what do you guys think about these things? Please leave a comment down below. Tell me what you guys think. And well, guys, I'm out. The ride never truly ends. Thank you, patrons, for helping support the channel. Without you guys, I don't know if I'd still be doing this. And for those of you that like Cardfight Vanguard, Vancold 40 is here for all your content needs. And those of you asking if I sell cards, mcoolgames.com for all your trading card game needs. Check the description for more interesting info. Thanks for watching, guys.